Hi, I'm Dr. Lurie. I'm a physician specializing in psychiatry, and I'm the author of Psyche-Politics, How to Read the Political Mind. You know, Psyche-Politics looks at politics from a completely unique perspective. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit more about managing fear. Now, there's some diagrams that are already up on the websites that show the relationship between stress, anxiety, and coping. And remember, we talked about some of the defenses people use against anxiety. That's the way they cope. They use defenses, and there are various ways one can do it. Now, once again, it's important to remember that if you challenge or confront a person's defense, you leave them with anxiety, because that's what the defense was protecting them against. And anxiety doesn't feel good. So they won't like you, and they'll disbelieve you, and they'll reinforce their defense, or occasionally they'll just feel anxiety, and again, they don't like that. So now we're going to talk about the defense of denial. Denial as a defense is not the denial of the fact of something. It's a denial of the implications. For example, a man drinks. He'll admit he drinks, but what he'll say is, what's the big problem? Well, his family knows what the big problem is. He gets pretty ornery. He might fall on his face at a wedding, which is rather embarrassing to the family. But those are the implications of his drinking. It can also hurt his health. You know, one of the things that's been so perplexing to me, however, as a psychiatrist, looking at things from afar, is what happened to the Jews in Germany as Hitler was promulgating his Jew-hate philosophy and ultimately became Chancellor or Prime Minister of Germany. There were many signals in the air. There were the stormtroopers. There were the critical cartoons of Jews. There was a lot of Jew slandering in the sense that Hitler was saying the Jews were bad for the country. They were vermin. And all the Jews saw that. It was right out there. He didn't hide it. And then he came to power. So the question is, who were the Jews who didn't deny the implications of what was going on? Who were the ones that had the ability to see through it and tolerate the anxiety and deal with it in another way? They left, and they survived. Now, mind you, it's not easy to do that, because all of your friends who were in denial about the implications of what Hitler was doing are saying, where are you going? What's the big deal? Things happen, they blow over, don't worry about it. But these people didn't use denial. They left. And I still don't quite understand how that all worked and how so many people did use denial. Well, then we know what happened, of course. There was a genocide, 6 million Jews were killed, and those who did not use denial were more or less heroes or smart. Now let's fast forward. What happened after that was that Israel was founded as a state. The world was guilty at letting this happen. It's unclear why, but America and the other Western countries supported Israel's becoming a state. But of course it wasn't that easy, because the surrounding Arabs attacked them many times. There was a war in 48. There was a war in 67. There was a war in 73, and so on. Now, each time that happened, the Jews, the Israelites, ultimately won, and they won in a clear-cut fashion. Nonetheless, something interesting happened in the aftermath. What happened was that the Jews in the diaspora, that is, the Jews living all over the world, were seen in a different light. Instead of being seen as homeless, they were seen as someone who had a place to go, and a place that was pretty credible, both militarily and intellectually. That's what Israel meant. It brought Jews out of the diaspora, and it protected Jews against another genocide. It protected them against, say, being hauled into the center of town in Eastern Europe at various holidays and beat up, because those things were happening. It wasn't just the German genocide. That's the vulnerability that a people has when they don't have a homeland, place to go. That's the meaning of Israel. And it's interesting because American Jews seem to regard Israel not so much as in their own interest in that sense, but they seem to have a loyalty to Israel for the reasons that a lot of other Americans do. It's a democracy, it's creative, it's successful, and it's strong. But it really never had a chance to rest, because there were people in the surrounding lands that would come and do what might be called terrorist acts to the various communities. They would set fires and run away. They would shoot mortars and run away. They would shoot machine guns. Now, the Israelis wanted these people to be acknowledged as terrorists, and this went on for a number of years. They especially wanted Yasser Arafat to be called a terrorist because that's what they believed he was. They believed he was behind these attacks. And in fact, there were times when he acknowledged he was. And then George Bush came along. Now, George Bush has been successfully demonized by the current administration, Barack Obama. It's one of the most complete demonizations, certainly in American politics. Either he didn't fight back, or Obama was just very successful in demonizing him. But with respect to American Jews, it's important to remember that Bush was the first person to call a Palestinian, Yasser Arafat, a terrorist. And again, let's look at the defense of denial. The facts are out there from the Jewish perspective. The president was raised, to some extent in his life, in a Muslim country, and pretty clearly has Muslim sympathies. One of the first things he did with respect to Israel in particular was to change the rules of understanding about where settlements could be built. That's a big issue in Israel, and it was one that was very disconcerting to the Israeli government and clearly very unsupportive. Another thing, another dot, another fact that isn't denied is that Barack Obama pulled troops out of Iraq. Now, when the Americans were in Iraq, the Israelis felt relatively secure, especially on their eastern front. However, the pullout from Iraq left a power vacuum for Iran to expand into, threatening Israel. Once again, you see lack of support for things that matter to American Jews, or should. More recently, Obama snubbed Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, really for the second time. The first time Netanyahu came to the States, there were some problems, but they eventually did meet. But this time, Obama does not even want to meet with Netanyahu. In the political world, internationally, this is a major snub. And then most recently, the Democratic Party, of course controlled by Obama and his surrogates, left Jerusalem as the capital of Israel out of their platform. This was no accident. It was no omission. And when there were a lot of presumably Jews who called this to the attention of the committee, Obama supported putting Jerusalem back in. But what's clear is that he had to have been behind leaving it out. Again, the dots are there. The facts are there. There's hardly a Jew or anyone in America who would doubt them. The question is, what are the implications? And are they being denied? Are the Jews who continue to support Obama like the Jews who stayed in Germany? Now look, when someone's in a political party or declares allegiance internally or to the world to a leader, it's very hard to change that. But what's interesting is the enthusiasm hasn't changed. The denial hasn't changed. And it's unclear if the Jews who remain in the Democratic Party, or at least those who support Obama, would be less anxious ultimately if they at least pulled back some of their support. However, defenses make one feel better. Denial is a very strong defense. It makes you feel better because it takes care of the anxiety about all these facts. Well, I don't really have any easy answers for this, but it is something to think about. In the next videos in this series, we'll talk about some more of the defenses that are used in politics today. They're defenses that we use all the time in our own personal lives. But remember, when politicians use them, they use them because many people in the population use them as well, and those defenses are accepted. We'll be doing one on rationalization, reaction formation, intellectualization, and others. So I hope you're able to see some of the other videos and finally get an understanding of how we work in our everyday lives with respect to fear and anxiety, and how it works in politics.